Welcome back, part 4 in the how to build a Versailles container series, step-by-step videos. Today we're going to finish off those tenons by putting the haunch inside it, cut the grooves for the panels and fit the frame together so those tenons fit those mortices. That sounds interesting, stick around. Hi, I'm Andy Guile and welcome to the Woodgrafter. Our mission here is to inspire, educate and support you in your journey to becoming a better woodworker. Regular videos coming out, such as this one where we go step by step through a project build, explaining the techniques and the approaches and the rationale behind the things that we do as woodworkers. We also do tips, techniques, tool reviews, just the sort of things that we'd like to know in our community. So if you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing now. If you like what we're doing, give me a thumbs up and get in touch. Leave a comment. We've got a highly interactive community. It's great to have you on board. Let's get cracking. So if you just joined us, this is what we're building. We're building a Versailles container. Episode 1, we cut these legs to length, put a chamfer on the end and broke the arris so it's easier on our hands and looks good. Episode 2, we put joinery inside all the legs, some mortices inside here and a dado to take the panels. Episode 3, we cut these bearers to length and put the tenons on the end of this. And today we're going to put the haunches on those tenons, cut the dados in these to receive these panels and fit the frame together using hand tools to finesse our joinery. So you should be at this stage by now. You should have a whole number of these bearers all cut to length, nice shoulders and nice clean tenons inside it. The first job for today is I want to put a 10mm channel right down the middle here. 12mm wide, 10mm deep to take the panel in the final assembly. We're going to do that on the router table. Let's go over there and set it up. We've got the same straight bit cut we've been using all along. This is a 12.7mm straight bit cutter. And the first job is to centre it onto the piece of material. It's a usual technique to centre this up. We do it on a scrap piece of wood. We make sure that the scrap piece is the same width as the piece of material we're using on the final joinery. We just set this at any arbitrary height, as long as it's going to make a cut, that's good enough. And by eye, we centre that up into the centre of our piece of material. We then take a cut, we spin it, we take a cut, and then we eyeball the router bit against the channel that we'll have made. And then we adjust the fence to get into the centre point. And that's pretty much what we do every single time. We then set a 0 point using the scale on the fence, and we can find that again as required. So let's do that. Turn the wood around, and now what we're looking to do is to eye the router bit up in the centre of that channel that we've just made, and that is pretty much bang on in the centre. So I now know that that's where it needs to be, so when I bring my final material in, it will make a cut down the centre of this stock. Perfect. Next job is I want to look at the height of this. We're going to make this cut at 10mm deep, so that's no harder than setting the height of the router bit. So we zero our calipers and adjust this till it reads 10mm, which is there. So it's now time to go ahead and make our cut. Now remember, we're cutting the side of the tenons we haven't yet worked on. We've already created the shoulder on this side, so it's this side that we're working on. And that will obviously take a 10mm cut from the top of the tenon and put that 10mm groove in as well. Let's do that. Now what we end up with is this nice clean channel through the material, and you can start to see how it's beginning to define the other end of the tenon. So now it's simply a matter of putting this channel into every piece. I'll do that, we'll come back together. And we end up with a whole host of bits of wood that looks like this. So our tenon's now pretty well defined. We've got a nice groove in the top, and now we have to allow for this haunch. So if you now look at the geometry of the joint, you can see it coming together. But you'll notice that the tenon is way too long, so we need a small haunch on this end. And you'll also notice that the ends of the mortise are actually round and the ends of our tenon are square. We need to bring the tenon down to be the length of the mortise, and this tenon and the mortise is actually 31 millimeters. So 31 millimeters from that top part takes me to there. And then we need to take this part here down to 10 millimeters, and then we need to round off the square parts of the tenon. The easiest way to do this is with hand tools. And what we can do, we can shape this one here, and then we can use that as a template to set up this cut here on the router table. So let's go ahead and shape this using hand tools, and then we can set this up on the router table and batch these out. So the first thing we'll do is we'll cut this to 31 millimeters in length, the length of our mortise from the round part to the round part, and we'll cut this piece down here to 10 millimeters. So working from the top of the tenon, 31 millimeters is there, and I know I want to leave a 10 millimeter piece on the end of that tenon, and 10 millimeters is there. So I now want to cut out that small chunk of the tenon. As always, I'm going to creep up on the joint, so I'll cut this slightly smaller than needed, and then we will fine tune it with the chisel to get it to fit perfectly. You're going to want to clamp this down nice and firmly to your table. Cut ever so slightly away from your line, and slowly and carefully cut down to just above your other line. So you can see what I've done there. I've cut slightly outside of this line, and I'm slightly above this line here. And then you can just take your chisel and just gentle tap, pop that off. Clean up your joint. So now I just want to round off these corners here on the tenon. And all we're looking to do is just to take off these top corners, clamp it down again, nice sharp chisel, gentle pressure onto that corner, and just ever so carefully pare that corner back. And do the same on this side. And you're just looking to put a nice round over on that end. You'll then end up with these curves here on the shoulder, coming flat onto the shoulder, and just rotate your chisel around that curve you just made, and then just pull it forward. Do not be tempted to lever onto this, that will cause you some problems. It will damage the shoulder. So straight in, rotate round carefully, slide it forward. And then you repeat that on this inside corner here and here. And you should end up with these round edges now on your tenon, and that should slot into there pretty well. Now hopefully you can see that the stub here is slightly too long because I've got this gap here, so I just need to now pare this stub back a little bit. It's a bit awkward, so I'm trying to do it without my head in the way of the camera. Yeah, now that's now not looking too bad as a joint. That's nicely seated, and that's nicely seated as well. Yeah, and it's a reasonable fit on the side as well. So that's it, we're going to call that good. Now at this point you have a choice. You can go through and do all of those by hand and fit them, or we can use a router to just notch out this little piece here. Now you're not going to be able to use the router to make these round edges. These round edges are always going to have to be done by your chisel and shaped according to the fit, but there's no reason at all why we can't batch out this notch now on the router table. So we'll set up to do that. That will allow us to batch out absolutely everything, and then we're in pretty good shape. Now we've still not moved the fence, so we know that this is already centered for us. If you have moved the fence, then you need to go back and recenter this in the way we have done before. So now it's simply a matter of raising the height of this so it's flush with the base of that tenon that we've just cut. There. Make sure you put the tip of your cutting edge onto the center of this. Don't get fooled and pick up the round edges by mistake. And now we can use a stop block to set the distance here. So I can now come in with my material, making sure the groove is down. You don't want to cut into the wrong end at this point, and just notch out that piece of material like so. Let's give that a go and see what it looks like. You can now see that's created a nice reveal there at the right depth. So now we can just take our chisel and clean down to that line. Now at this point you're probably asking yourself, why don't I just come in and cut this across the grain like this, because that wouldn't give me that curve profile, it'd give me a flat profile. The simple reason is there's nothing to support the grain, and because we haven't actually got any shoulders here like we had before, that will rip out your material straight through here, and that will make quite a mess of your joint. So it takes a bit longer, but it's going to give you a neater joint. Of course, you may decide that you don't need that haunch, and in that case you're just going to cut this straight down to the shoulder at whatever that depth is, and that's going to give you a good job, because that's never going to be seen anyway, it's inside the framework. So you need to do this if indeed you're putting the haunch on the material. Now regardless of whether you're going for the haunch or not haunch, you will still then by hand have to put each of the curves across this joint. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cut all these notches out, I'm going to round all the ends over with a chisel, and then we'll come back together and start to put the frame together so we can finesse the joints. See you in a minute. Okay, so that's it. So that's all those tenons cut, all the haunches are now cut, and all those tenons are now rounded over. What I now like to do at this point is a test fit, because now is the time to realise you've got gaps or problems and you can fix it now rather than down the line. What you're looking for is some light clamping pressure here, and you're just making sure that all these joints are seating nicely for you, and these are. And if you follow the processes that we went through, you will find that this comes out pretty well. If you have got gaps, the chances are you've got a little bit of dirt on the shoulder lines, and just recheck each of those shoulder lines, and anything that's not quite flat or quite coplanar, just take a chisel and finely refine it. And you're looking to fit now each of these joints. You're also making sure that these grooves inside actually all line up, and in our case that they do. And the final check is you want to make sure is everything coming out square, and again in our case it is. And you're checking that on all dimensions of your cube. Is everything nice and flush? Yes. Is everything lined up here? Yes. Is everything square? Yes. And you go around the cube and you check that on all these joints, and anything you're not happy with, now's the time to refine it. Once you've done that, this is now a set, so this joint will always want to go into this mortise on this leg. So now's a good time to mark it as well. So we will call this A1, A1, B1, B1, C1, C1, D1 and D1. On this side we'll call this one A2, A2, B2, B2, C2, C2, D2 and D2, and then you work around the cube in that way. 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then you keep that together as a set, so when you come to reassemble it, you know that all these joints are going to work and they're going to fit because you've just proven it to yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all of these 3 cubes that I've got now. Next time we're together, I want to look at these panels, cut these down to size, glue the panels up and put a small relief on the back to allow them to fit in perfectly. See you next time.